work hard and stick with it. How are you serving as your best? What are your strengths? How do you employ those strengths to be able to put this transition strategy into play?
Gosh, I can relate to that.
How do I give back to the world?
Boundary Breakers, we sit down with extraordinary individuals who have made their way to the very pinnacle of their chosen profession. In this week's episode, we sit down with Christopher Schmitt. Chris spent 30 years as an elite special forces operator in the U.S. Army. Before leaving the military, Chris figured out exactly what he wanted to do when he transitioned into civilian life. Chris recognized that he could take all of the experiences and extraordinary leadership lessons that he learned as a Green Beret and share those as an executive business coach to CEOs and other executives across the world. Specifically, Chris has designed a U.S. Special Forces selection experience for business executives, where he takes executives out on a 4-day mountain expedition, selection style, to learn some unbelievable leadership lessons. I really think you're going to love this episode. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter and Clark. Just to be able to share the stories so that we can, inspire a budding entrepreneur that's dying to or thirsty for knowledge about how do I get there, or whether it's just somebody that's just curious about, a window into the minds of the super successful, and an opportunity for you to have the microphone to share what you're obviously passionate about on the consulting and entrepreneurial side. So how did you get to West Point? I've got an interesting story about West Point myself, but I'd rather you talk.
I grew up in Howards Grove, Wisconsin. So I grew up in small town America. And, I had a conversation with my teachers and some mentors at school and high school that, hey, I read some stuff about this place called West Point. Can you tell me, more about it? And this particular mentor said, yeah, I think it's out in California. Well, I didn't grow up in a place where anybody, very few people, there was the VFW. That was a very foundational aspect in community involvement. But I grew up in a town of 998 people. A lot of people didn't go to college. There really wasn't a huge expectation. I was the first in my family to go to college. The point I guess I'm making is, how did I find out? Well, I read about it, and then I applied. I took action. I was a little bit behind this cycle, but my House of Representatives, the congressman from our district, nobody else applied, so I got the nomination.
Oh, wow!
But that wasn't good enough because I still needed to get accepted by West Point, and I did
Absolutely.
not. My SAT scores were horrible, and even though I was a good student in Howards Grove High School, I wasn't prepared for the math requirement of West Point. So I didn't have a high enough SAT. I didn't get accepted. And because I was really motivated about this idea of West Point, and I really saw that duty on our country as a North Star of who I wanted to be someday, I said, you know what, I'm going to join the Army and it's going to work out. And maybe some ridiculous optimism, but I think that's a bit of my trademark. And I enlisted as a infantryman. I immediately, even upon my break from basic training to advanced infantry training, I went to the library where my buddies were out getting beers. I went to the library and applied to the prep school. And I started taking the SATs, and I took the SAT over and over and over. And the story now, as it goes, is I took the SATs 12 times. Not 100% positive.
12 times
is the number, because truth is I'm not very good with math. But I took it a bunch, and I finally scored that score that I needed, and I was accepted to the academy. But what that meant is, in the bell-shaped curve of math acumen, I'm on the low end. And classes, there's some classes at the academy are graded on a curve. So I knew that if I didn't work hard, I knew that if I didn't just really grind, I was going to get cut, because I was going to get cut by that bottom 10% of the bell-shaped curve. And I failed calculus second semester, my plebe year. So I got a chance to retake it in the summer. I was my sophomore year, physics and statistics were things that I didn't excel at, but I stayed with it. And they taught me regimen. They taught me discipline. I had a question. I had a conversation with my chemistry teacher in my sophomore year. I took foreign language my freshman year, so I could defer chemistry to my sophomore year. So I got to, while I'm taking physics, I'm taking chemistry, and I'm taking, these higher end engineering courses, because West Point is an engineering school. And I asked him, why on earth am I learning this stuff? Like I've already been an infantryman. I know how to do it. I have a good feeling of what a platoon leader is supposed to do. And I'm excited to learn and work and be that person. And he said, there's going to be a rainy night in the future that it's going to be miserable and you're having to make really hard decisions, and you need to have a process. And what the math will do, when you're doing a math problem at West Point, you're putting every bit, and often you're told to take boards. So you're up at the blackboard with chalk, writing out all your steps, working to the bottom, getting to the bottom, pulling out the ruler and double underlining your answer. There's a process, and that process trains the discipline that was necessary for, working through a plan under a poncho in a really difficult spot. And whether that really difficult spot was in my military career, was in Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, the Sahara, all those places that I had the opportunity to serve and lead. That time at the academy gave me an advantage that, hey, it's just time to grind. It's time to do what's necessary. It's time to work through the process and make sure that you follow the regimen necessary to get to the solution, double underline it, because that's what the guys need. That's what we're going to need to be successful. That's what they need from me to be thorough. So I'm creating clarity. So I'm creating a good sense of vision, and they understand why the hell we're doing this, why we're risking our lives in this situation, and what we're going to do. Not that I'm telling them what to do, but I'm giving them the boundaries. I'm giving them the vision, so that as a good special operator, they understand, hey, this is the purpose. These are the key tasks. This is the end state. This is how it all rolls out.
Oh, wow. I love that. Well, gosh, what a stunning example of perseverance at 18, 19 years old, right? I mean, that was you made the decision, and you I made the decision.
I don't know what made me that motivated, but Pa Schmitt definitely set a good example of work hard and stick with it. Both my parents, with a family name of Schmitt, there's a whole lot of, I grew up in a small town. My dad worked in a brick and block factory. There was a lot of hard work pays off. Very pragmatic approach. They're in a German family, as you can imagine. There's not a lot of drama. Just do. It's been a process that's worked for me. I've had to open that aperture. Parenting in 2023 is a lot different than I think the parenting that my folks had to do with me. But
I can only imagine. Well, look, you and I have a lot more in common than I think we initially knew. So I went through the entire process, the application process for West Point. Ended up with a nomination, and was somehow overlooked a lot of stuff because I was accepted, and I still have that letter framed because I was thrilled and I was excited, and then the Department of Defense medical board called and said, Mr. Ansley, we're sorry, there's been an oversight. You've been medically disqualified from the United States military. Thank you. Have a nice life. But look, like you, I did not want to be.
But I saw Citadel on your LinkedIn.
That's right.
So
So I went to the second best, right? So
I would argue you
decided,
probably went to a place that was a little bit more fun. In the summer of '92, the commandant was Colonel Zinser, who was one of my classmates' dads, and we visited the Citadel, and it was after a parade on a Saturday, and there was a lot of pretty girls running around, and
yes,
and it looked like a pretty fabulous place too.
Well, Charleston, South Carolina is an amazing place. Somehow I always found that I was, walking tours or serving confinements. But, my friends let me know how much fun it was. But
there you go.
But look, I love it. I mean, there's, you could probably write a book just on the story of your perseverance going to West Point. That's amazing. But if that wasn't enough, you became a Green Beret. And, I don't want to, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about war stories or anything like that. But I do want to make sure that the audience just understands and gets a taste of just generally what a Green Beret is and how difficult it is to become one.
Well, there's a process, but as we already talked through, process I'm okay with. And in fact, selection, I found selection to be a blast because at the time of going through selection, I was the assistant operations officer of an infantry battalion. So honestly, selection was a break from the grind of my job. That job is really kind of a deputy CEO, if there was such a thing. Or
gotcha.
I think that would be the best way to describe it. An operations officer is a operations officer, and that job as a captain in a battalion is given to someone who's a bright and shiny penny, and is willing to do a ton of work. And so
full of optimism. Right?
So doing selection meant, hey, it gets written up on the board, be here at this time in this uniform with a rucksack with this much water and and this stuff gear, make sure it weighs this weight. Okay, no problem. I can do all those things. That's not very ambiguous at all. And the sergeant in charge of that event, we're in formation. He says, all right, start in this direction. The task is a run, but I don't even think he says that much information. It's clearly move out this way the best you can. We're in running shoes and shorts. So it's clear that we're supposed to run, and you don't know how far it is. You don't know what the standard is, because what they're looking for is people that can work well in ambiguity. So, pretty fit guy. I've just found it to be a blast. I just stayed up towards the front and worked hard any place there was a turn. But a lot of guys, they would come back and we'd be done with that 8-mile run or whatever it was. We'd come back into the barracks and they were like obsessing. I wonder if I went fast enough. Did I meet the standard? I don't know what the standard is. And I was pretty happy because I just did my best, because that's what they said, do your best. And I had a Tom Clancy novel that I brought with me, and I sat down and started reading again. Whether it was, rucksack run, a packing, when we go to the team selection, there's all this, here's 3 55-gallon barrels and 4 logs and 3 tires. You need to move those 55-gallon barrels, 10 kilometers. And by the way, they're filled with water. So go.
Oh my gosh.
And what you have to do is you just have to work together and figure it out. And that was a great prep for the ambiguity of, hey, Captain Schmitt, we need you to find the Uchika commander inside of Kosovo. Here's a little voice intercept of what he sounds like. We know his code name is Rexa, but we really don't know his name. Go. Wow. And that sounded a lot like, here's 2 55-gallon barrels and here's some tires.
Yeah.
And, my team joked on that mission, we joked regularly, one of the last culmination exercises of earning your Green Berets, this time in Pineland. And a lot of my peers, they post on their LinkedIn that they're a graduate of Pineland University, which is tongue in cheek. There is no Pineland University, but you've graduated this crucible of it's a war scenario. There's a part of North Carolina that preps for this event a couple times a year, and there's a ton of role players. It's in the community. The police are involved. The mayor's involved. Lions and tigers and bears. There's horse trailers. And you're commanding your guerrilla organization. You're meeting up with a guerrilla chief and you're building rapport with them, especially as an officer, and you're motivating them to conduct whatever the mission, the task is. What was interesting, but I also think is pretty fantastic, is that first big mission of my team leader time inside of Kosovo. Every day we would come back as a team doing all the things that we were trying to figure out and get moving in the right direction. We'd come back together as a team and the team would say, yeah, what happened in Pineland to you today? Because this is clearly like somebody's dictating, because you'd get it all squared away. And it was super fun, actually, because well, we were moving positively in a space of empowering the UÇK to get us the information that when the air war went from strategic to tactical, we had the information to be able to be effective. And then now when after 2 periods of darkness, the Serbian, I won't even go as far as saying military, I'd say at that point it was thugs that they called no mas quickly, because you're going against U.S. air power, and the information that we had was very accurate, and as a result, very lethal. And they capitulated, which meant now we're taking Ahmed Asufi, who I've built rapport with. We're moving towards demilitarization. We're moving towards what peace looks like, and being his counterpart in the conversations that will turn into, what does peace look like?
Wow.
And super cool to be part of that and shape my mind of, hey, I might be a steely-eyed, barrel-chested freedom fighter in my mind, but as a Green Beret, my job is to be a lot more thoughtful. My job is to find solutions. And so whether that meant time in Afghanistan later, time in the Sahara, in which we're trying to stop foreign fighter flow. So we're looking at solutions like, how do we empower Colonel Mary in Chad to look at Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb in northern Mali as a threat to the region and a threat to his country, and to convince President Deby that they need to be employed, not because the U.S. government asked them, but because they saw it as a necessary thing to do. And it's so cool to be part of things like that and use those basic things like going through the process and double underlining my math problem, to use that as a mental model of how we can do big things like create hope in the poorest places on the planet.
Wow. That's really inspiring. And it's interesting from how you describe selection to how you describe having to influence a lot of these foreign leaders or working with the foreign military to influence them to get the outcome that we I guess are collectively looking for. I can see how this translates, almost perfectly into business, right? I mean, you mentioned having to move these 50-gallon drums full of water, and how do you do it? You work together. And then you've got 30 years of...
Yeah, you not only work together, but you try to say, all right, Brandon, you're really good at tying knots. You got the knots. I am really good at carrying heavy things. So, I'll be the guy that's holding the barrels. And Billy, you're really good at navigating. So you're on the map. So what I'm trying to do in selection is I'm trying to make sure that my team is playing as their best self. What I'm trying to do, if I use the Curl Mary example, like he's a solid character. He's a good man. He's got a ton of influence because his cousin is President Debbie. And he's respected by his troops because he works his butt off. So I can now leverage his best self, and their organization is really great at fire and maneuver, and they have desert warfare down. So I'm not going to try to put my U.S. model of how to be an operator on him. I'm going to empower him to be his best. Fast forward a couple years, and yesterday I had a chance to work with a team at Uber, and the conversation 100% from the senior leader to her direct reports is, how are you serving as your best? What are your strengths? How do you employ those strengths to be able to put this transition strategy into play? And what are the, those incremental steps that allow for those quick wins that drive organizational success at the top? They're all the same.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's what I think is cool, is that what I did is useful. And what I get to do now, yes, it's business and it's about making money, but it's also about business and how it creates jobs and livelihood. And if people are in a positive place and they love what they're doing and their boss gives them ownership because you tie knots really well and you get to tie knots. Now I dig my job. I like the organization. My boss respects me. My boss is pretty cool. And that's something that no doubt is trained. If you're going to be a Green Beret, you better be cool. And that's why we have the cool sunglasses and all that. You got to be cool, and you gotta take ownership in that crazy. Find the UÇK commander inside of Kosovo and make friends. Well, what kind of mission is that? Well, that's the mission I got. So let's own it and figure it out and make the best of it and see where it can go. And where it can go is we can end this war really quickly, and we can influence what the peace looks like, because Ahmed Asufi speaks German, and I happen to speak German as well.
Oh, wow. Golly, that is amazing. I mean, you were right there at the fulcrum of that entire operation that helped bring peace.
At the time said, hey, we have no ground troops in Kosovo. And my team was a little bit upset with me at that point. But I said, hey, I think what he said was, there's no boots on the ground. So we're going to wear running shoes today.
We got to change shoes.
I it was before the internet, and it was 1999, so there wasn't my ability to Google exactly what he said. I think he said boots on the ground.
I love it. Well, that's amazing. And I mean, I could spend an hour just asking you questions about that, but I'm fascinated by, as I think sounds like you are as well, how unbelievably well that translates over and into the business world. And I want to talk about, Azimuth Consulting, your company. So after 30 years in the military, retired as a Green Beret, you transition into executive leadership coaching with your company, Azimuth Consulting. Is that correct?
Azimuth Consulting Group. And what's neat about this story is it starts back in the Green Beret space. I'm sitting on a cot outside one of our training facilities in Gao, Mali, and I'd just flown in from Senegal or Burkina Faso. My responsibility as the J3 of this realm is is 10 countries in this region. It's a massive geographical space, and the special forces, SEALs and Marine Raiders that are working in this area, in order to prevent the growth of extremism, Salaficism in the area, but even more importantly, the foreign fighters going into Iraq and Afghanistan from these 99% Muslim, disenfranchised places without a lot of hope. And I'm sitting on this cot drinking a bottle of hot water because it's hot. and I'm thinking to myself, man, I could use a thought partner right now. Man, I could use someone just to chat with, to kind of formulate my thoughts, because I think we're doing a good job, but there's a lot on my mind. You know, in my someday life, my someday world, first, I'm going to live in a place that's rainy and cool, and I live east of Seattle, so check.
Perfect.
And I'm going to do that. I'm going to figure out like how I can be in the mountains, and I can use, my passion to be in outside wilderness spaces, and to be able to use that as a tool to help with being a thought partner, an inspiration, a check on learning, maybe even a little bit of a teacher. Ultimately, all that stuff in the special forces world kind of gets summed up into advisor. And so I had that thought, and but it was just a thought. A couple years later, I had an opportunity to get a master's degree, and I chatted with the gentleman after I got my degree in organization development, and he said, "You know what? That's an executive coach." And I'm like, "Oh, cool! It's got a title. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to be an executive coach."
It exists.
And I've been able to take the idea of azimuth. Azimuth is a direction on a compass, and in an Army vernacular, an azimuth check. Hey, sir, what's your azimuth? They're not asking me, oh, hey, I'm walking 22 degrees over the mess hall. My azimuth is kind of my vision. What do I see? What's the direction that we want us to go? And so I really love that visual of, hey, I'm going to help teams, individuals. I'm going to help them be able to clarify where they are on the map and where they're ultimately wanting to go and how they're going to get there, and what azimuth they need to take, what risks are going to be on the way, how do they mitigate those risks, how do they plan for things, how do they get to that destination, and achieve rule number one, and that's no one perishes. So how do you get to rule number one, no one perishes, and get to your destination? How do you get to your goals? And that's a super cool analogy for someone who loves being in that advising, teaching, helping people, inspiring people space, and also is super passionate about being outside. And the idea of being in the mountains really, on one of the tools I use is a tool called the Berkman method. And the Berkman method, my score on the Berkman method gives me a 98 outside and a 96 in social service. So if I'm following my passion and I'm in the space that I'm stoked, I'm doing just that.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about the Berkman method here in a second, but I just wanted to circle back. The thought that you had on that cot that you could really use a thought partner, I think were the words that you used. Gosh, I can relate to that. As a CEO myself, it's often a lonely place to be. There are decisions that you have to make, or that we have to make, that sometimes it would just be so nice to have somebody to just bounce ideas off of, and just get an azimuth check, right? Am I crazy? Am I going in the right general direction here, or am I doing something?
I've had several coaching calls today. I've just come back from the Traverse. I did a quick trip down to San Francisco, so some of my stuff got moved into Friday. And in between my calls, I'm texting with a CEO that's having one of his C-suite members is disenfranchised and is having a real tough time. And exactly what you're just saying right now. I love that I can just simply be someone that can be a sounding board for him. And in a way to be able to not only be a sounding board, but to offer up, hey, you're not crazy, and you're not being mean. In fact, I would say, there's an opportunity to inject a little bit of kindness here, and simply be a validation to a super high performer that's super smart and is super capable, who's working with some friction, but is working with someone who's also super smart, super capable, and allow for just simply some of my injection, and even a quick 4-minute phone call between his next call and my next call, be able to be there for him, if that's not too presumptuous.
No, it's not. It's not, Chris. I was just thinking, look, we live so much in our heads, particularly these days, right? And when we're trying to make decisions or think about things, often it stays within our own mind. So the opportunity simply to just explain what's going on to somebody else, I think, can be beneficial for a business executive, because it requires them to organize their thoughts and communicate it. And they got to hear themselves say something that they may have been thinking about for 6 or 8 months, but it was just, they were just thinking about it, right? So I immediately understand and see the value of just having somebody to just tell things to. And that may sound silly.
No, I say it all the time. So it's, if you're thinking it sounds silly, well, you're telling me what I'm saying is silly, and I'm a retired Green Beret. We shouldn't do that.
Well,
no, what I want to say is, amen, brother, because I think that's it. I really do. And I think that we don't often have, whether high performing men or women, we just don't. As a high performer, by definition, we probably don't have a big support group. We probably don't have someone to lean on. We just finished the Traverse, and the team that I worked with, 4 super high performers, the leader of this crew of 4, and I'm going to call him the leader because Kevin called the 3 other guys and told them, hey, you need to do this thing.
Okay.
So they didn't know each other. So the 4 of them didn't know one another, but they all knew Kevin and they trusted him. And I think it was somewhere between the morning and evening of day 2, they named themselves Team Silverback. The oldest is 66. I think the youngest is 53 or 54. So they're not spring chickens, but they're moving quickly because they're decisive. They're being thoughtful about their routes. They're working really well together. They're communicating. They're sharing tasks on breaks when we need to do water resupply. It isn't just they all crash and start, pulling out some food from the ruck. They're jumping in, grabbing the water filter and working through things. The bottom line is, it was so fabulous to see them working as a team. But more importantly, what I saw was that exact need. Like, they were talking about, hey, I started the firm, with this 30-year fund. And I said, when that fund matures, I'm going to retire. And you know what, Chris, that fund retired in June. That fund matured in June. And I'm still nugging away. I'm thinking about retirement. And so these guys are working through how to be a great dad. In one case, how to be a grandpa because he's about to be one. He has no idea how that works out. Wow. How do I ensure that my relationship with my wife's intact? What are the things that I'm going to do if I do retire? How do I give back to the world? Because I've been graced with not only wealth, but opportunity, with experience. I love, I think I mentioned, I love climbing mountains. So I love that on the 4 days and 3 nights, we're summiting 5 mountains. We're in Montana. We're in this fabulous location. But I love even more that what we created was an opportunity for those guys to deep dive on their perspective and what they're seeing and some of the context and how the mountains can geolocate an idea like courage or adaptability. And they can move forward with that thought and say, hey, the lessons I'm learning from how to climb this mountain by going low and green or high and right, whatever those mental models, those little flywheels kind of work out, how they apply to life when we go home to our communities. And the fact that though Team Silverback just connected like that, I know that the brain science, because I when I started executive coaching in order to avoid some fear that, I was a fraud, I went to, I took my West Point Green Beret Ranger experience, and I went to Columbia University and did the executive coaching certification. And that gave me some greater context and content so I could conduct myself as a good coach.
Okay.
But my project there was I made the curriculum, and I wanted to learn the neuroscience of what happens when you're in the mountains, what happens when you're taking a group and you're doing coaching. And I know that up on that mountain, they're going to be filled with a sense of dopamine because they just accomplished. But they're also going to be filled with a bunch of serotonin because the view is extraordinary. And after day 2 or day 3, and the fact that we summited Granite Mountain and no other team had done it, dopamine because no one else had done it, serotonin because we're doing it, and it's really extraordinary. And the valley over there is amazing. And I can see where I've been before, and that was really great. And now this oxytocin because, man, I love this group of guys that I'm doing stuff with because we're having all these great conversations. And that works for the client, but it works for the advisor as well.
Wow. That's amazing. So Traverse, share with the audience a little bit. This is a planned, summit, I guess, for lack of a better.
I call it a leadership expedition.
Expedition. Okay. Tell us about that.
The tagline is, "This is a world-class leadership expedition."
Got it. Okay.
And what it is it's a hike through the mountains, and it's a hike that day 1 starts on trail and gets you to a location. This time we did it in Montana, in the Rocky Mountains in Montana, and we get up to this mountain lake, and it's a pretty easy day. It's a shakeout. I want to check clients and make sure their gear is typed down. We're on trail, but there's a place where we go off trail, and I want to see, hey, how does that feel? Hot spots, boots feeling okay. And we get up to camp and we set in camp, and I've had traverses where people go, hey, Chris, this is really the first time I'm ever going to be sleeping in a tent. No problem. You happen to be on snow, so it's not only going to be the first time you're sleeping in the tent, but when you're sleeping on snow, you need to make sure you got your mat down like this. So all of it is kind of slow steps, but it's incremental steps. And day two, while they look up at the mountain, they see the initial goal for day two is Middle Mountain. They look up and go, holy cow, that's like 2,000 feet above the lake. And it's like right above the lake. Like, I don't know how we get up there. And I'm like, you're never going to touch your hand down. You're going to be hiking the whole way. And they go, I don't understand how it's done. And I'm like, well, you're going to get the information on the move. So if you need all the information, you're not going to get it from here. You got to get closer to the problem. And the military's troop leading procedures say that in order to finalize a plan, you have to initiate movement in order to complete the plan. So we use troop leading procedures. We use priority of work. We use some of that really cool best stuff of the Army and the special operations community in this 4-day, 3-night experience. And if it's in Montana, if it's in Patagonia, I want to do one in the Pyrenees in Spain. It doesn't matter, because those simple mental models, those simple flywheels, they work if you have the regimen, if you have the discipline to put one foot in front of the other. If you have the ability to say, Brandon, you're super good on the map. I'm not that comfortable. In fact, I've never navigated in the mountains before. Please, you've got Gaia, you kind of give me a sense. I'm going to go the route. Just make sure that while I'm moving and looking for the easiest terrain and avoiding dead down trees and rocks and cliffs, little cliffs, whatever you call that. Because Brandon, if you are on the map and you put me on a cliff, I'm upset with you, because you being your best would mean that you put me there intentionally.
I wouldn't do that.
But you get the point. And so it becomes, how you empower others to be their best self. It is incremental progression achieves results. It is calmness provides clarity and being cool. It's about taking ownership. It's about being consistent. And, and each of the leaders, they get a chance, each of the participants get a chance to be in charge. So it's about being decisive, because decisiveness inspires confidence. And it's a blast because you're in the mountains, and it's so fun.
It sounds like it. So my first question before I get to anything else is, number one, where do I sign up? And I'm serious.
I'll hold you to.
We could talk a little bit after this, because that's right up my alley. My interpretation of what you're doing is that you figured out a way to organize and present a mini Green Beret experience for business executives,
and
right?
in true Green Beret fashion, on night 2, you're eating steaks. On night 3, you're eating salmon in the camp. I have a logistics team that is moving asynchronously with the teams, and they're coming in from different angles to be able to set up a camp so that we can keep our packs around 30 pounds, so that we aren't moving through the mountains with 50 pounds. Like, they're, let's just say, 8-hour days. So you're under load at 10,000 feet for a considerable amount of time. But I don't want you to drop your head. I want to keep your head up. I want you to be fueled. So, there's high protein bacon. I think each morning with 18 in my camp this last traverse, I think we are looking at 7 to 8 dozen of eggs for the group each day. So, it's high. It's meant to be high calorie, high protein, because if you're a high performer, protein matters. If you're a high performer, we're going to talk about sleep. And so it's not a suck. It's not, I'm not going to have you roll left, roll right on the beach and tell you about how to become gritty. But to those people that have completed the traverse, they're definitely going to be, challenged. hard.
Okay.
It's and I've had clients that ask, so are you gonna like sneak in our tents and draw little red lines across our necks with a Sharpie? And I'm like, well, the mountains will take care of all of that. Believe me, like day 2 it's less than 5 miles on the map, but it's going to take 8 hours. We're working as hard as we can. It's because we're summiting 2 mountains, and the route selection has to be very thoughtful. And as a result of that thoughtful, we'll get to a creek. We're at the creek, the advisor will talk to you about the key special operations attribute of adaptability, how adaptability is very important, because the plan that you had to get to the creek and go and climb Granite Mountain, well, as you collected information on the move, you realize now that plan is probably not as good of a plan as it could be, and I'm going to need to adjust.
Okay.
I need to be adaptable. And that adaptability will get you to a place where, you're going to have to, as the leader, you're going to have to now confidently communicate what the new plan is. And in the case of Team Silverback, Kevin said, all right, hey, we're going to summit Granite Mountain, the front side that we already just learned. It's really hard to get up it. We're going to go low and green. This aspect right here that's facing to the kind of southwest has some green stuff on it. I don't know what it will do in terms of footing, but we're going to go up to that little bush up there. And from that point, I'm going to make an assessment. And so that confident communication, that decisiveness, not only instills confidence, but there's a level of calmness and clarity that makes the team feel, yeah, let's do this. Let's get it. Like, even if it doesn't work out, at least we'll feel like we're moving forward in the right direction. And how many times would that have been valuable in your business life to feel like, we're tracking. It's going to be a lot of hard work. I don't know if it's going to go.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds like the exact microcosm of all major initiatives that we work on in business. I mean, it's that challenge of trying to communicate the commander's intent or leader's intent so that you keep everybody generally focused or understanding the azimuth direction, right? But at the same time saying, I don't know what's around that next corner, right? So I can't tell you the specific answer to exactly what we're going to do on Wednesday or on the 30th or next quarter. But I do know, generally speaking, we want to stay, low and green, for example, right? I can't tell you, maybe every step to take, but we've at least figured out that we have a general strategy that works, and as long as we're, cohesive around that, then that we'll be successful. I mean, so do you? It sounds like you break everybody up into teams, and then you have what almost sounds like a selection style challenge for the teams to complete. Is that, am I?
Well, unlike selection where there's no end in sight, the team, there is there's a lake each night where there's going to be a camp, and the tents are going to be set up, and Kai and Kelly are going to be, cooking steaks and mashed potatoes, and there might be s'mores, or if Kelly's feeling benevolent and he brought his Dutch oven, there might be like some kind of incredible huckleberry something or other that's getting more. The point is that unlike selection, there's clarity. There's not an ambiguity of where we have to go or where we have to, what's our destination. But like selection, no one's telling you how to do it. And as a team, as the person that's in charge, talking to that team, you got to I'm not going to let you, as an advisor, I'm not going to let you step off the cliff. I'm not going to let you put yourself in a dangerous situation. And these are big mountains. It's Montana. But you're never going to be in a place where if you slip and fall, you're going to skin your knee, but you're not going to fall off something. You're going to have to, if you fall, you're going to have to get up, grab your hiking poles and keep on going. Maybe dust yourself off, but
yeah. So you've got the guardrail. You got the guardrails for them, but you're not giving them training wheels.
I have two helicopter landing zones that are already talked through with the life flight guys. I have several Kazovac spots where Kelly and Kai, who are doing my logistics, they have ATVs and can come pick people up if somebody twisted a knee or an ankle. So there's a whole apparatus following behind it.
Serious operation.
Well, it's a bunch of retired Green Berets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for us non-Green Berets, it's a very serious operation.
Green Berets who like to plan that when we're done, everyone has 4 good ideas of how we could have done it better next time, and that's happened year after year after year now. So it keeps getting better. It's so exciting.
When is the next one? When do
June
you have
28th through July 1st, 2024 will be the next one.
Oh wow, okay.
And I hope to have one in September as well. I had a company that wanted to do it, and now I think they're hesitating because there's some leadership changes that are happening. But the bottom line is I hope to do 2 of them next year, and actually I hope to be able to do 3. And what my plan is that if you've done one of the Montana or one of the basic ones, then you qualify to be able to do a more advanced one like Patagonia or the Pyrenees, where we'll and be a little bit further out there, because I want to ensure that everyone who's doing it is not only prepared to do it, but is able to get the benefit of it and not just be in the space of, oh my God, I don't know if I can take another step further, because that's not good for the team of the clients that the team, but it's also not good for that individual, because I want them to leave the experience supercharged and fired up to make a difference in their community, because they just had 4 extraordinary days talking with a bunch of, clients that are extraordinary men and women. I had a 26-year-old CEO on this Traverse, who has a device, I guess that's the right word to call it, a machine that talks to fruit, and is currently being used in Wenatchee as the apples are being picked, so that it talks to apples and pears, and it picks up the pheromones or the gases, and knows where they are in the ripening process. And it's something that she built in college at UPenn. And now she's out here in Seattle, doing great things. And I love that I had a 26-year-old and a 66-year-old on this past Traverse, and they both had fabulous experiences. Very different, but both had fabulous experiences.
Gosh, I can imagine. Well, Chris, I want to be really respectful of your time, but one of the things that I've been dying to ask you is this idea of using kindness as a tool. First of all, as an aside, I could not agree more. I think kindness and authenticity and humility are so underutilized and so powerful. And so I can't wait to hear this. But coming from a Green Beret, it's very interesting.
It's enabling because it's a bit unexpected, but if I have a conversation on one operation that I can pinpoint, if we have a conversation with the senior male of the house and say, hey, I'm not going to, we knocked on the door. We didn't bust the door down. We could have, we're totally capable, but that would have been disrespecting you. And what I would like to do is I'd like to make sure that this is a win-win. Your nephew, he's not a good person, and he's affiliated with a bomb-making network that's responsible for a bunch of a bunch of explosions around town that have harmed a lot of kids. And you know it. You probably don't like him, and your wife doesn't like him. So if we have a children's clinic in town and it's your responsibility, you're the one that brought it, or a well pops up in this area, which we have the capability of doing, I respectfully request that you turn over your nephew. Does it any skin off my nose to have that extra verbiage? I have a medic on our teams. It's easy to do a children's clinic. We just come with some basic medical care in a place that there is no care. It's extraordinary and it's life-changing. Some kid's got ringworm on his arm. It just takes some bacitracin and it goes away. If he doesn't do it, it becomes something that sticks with him for the rest of his life. So it's not a big deal.
Right.
So let's translate that to corporate America. If we can inspire a conversation that allows everyone to be able to say what they need to say, and as a leadership style, you come alongside your people, because we're in a world now, there's way too much information that as a leader, it's impossible to be the old heroic leader that says, hey, I know everything. There's nothing that I won't do. There's nothing that I'll ask you to do that I won't do myself. All that's great. But in this world that we're in now with AI, there's no way to keep up with it. So kindness says, hey, Brandon, I know you're an expert on this thing. Tell me about it. And how does that work out? And if you're in my shoes and we had to move the initiative in this direction, how would you implement the thing that you're an expert on? And suddenly you go, hey, Chris is a pretty cool boss. He actually asked me what I think. And I'm just going, I have no clue how to do this. But I know that as a leader now in 2023 going forward, like, you're going to have to do more of that. And so if I'm concerned about you, or I'm concerned about maybe something that's going on in your family, and I know that, hey, you need to take a breather on Friday because your kid's sick, and like, I know that you're going to be back on Monday and you're going to crush it. So it might be very practical, but it's also just about, it's a tool. It's another tool in my kit bag, and it's a tool that I use as a Green Beret in many different places. And I think that it's an essential tool for a leader in where we are right now.
I could not agree more. And I think it's a very powerful tool. It's underutilized. Like I said, and I certainly did not mean to suggest that. I think I used the term unusual. I think, and you responded with maybe it's unexpected, which was what I intended to say. That you don't necessarily.
Nothing taken. I didn't even hear you say that. The bottom line is, it is unexpected. It totally was. And I had bosses going, why the hell are you doing that? Like, you get it done a lot faster. And I'm like, but it won't be more effective.
Yeah.
Well, you put me in charge, so.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, you asked me to do it. Just one quick question on that, then we could wrap up. I mean, I try in my leadership style to use kindness as a tool as well. And I think that the risk or the potential blowback is that oftentimes maybe short-minded or short-sighted folks will mistake kindness for weakness. Right. And the balancing, using it as a tool, but making sure that it isn't taken advantage of or interpreted as weakness. I'm curious if you're present, if you're there, if you're decisive, if you're cool, no one's going to take advantage of kindness, because there might be a quick, someone kind of turn the tables on you, but that gives you an opportunity to immediately say, hey, listen, this is the way that we're doing this. Or, hey, listen, you have a responsibility. Make sure you get that requirement done. And I don't have to. I never need to raise my voice. In fact, it's a waste of time, I think, to get emotional. And I can,
without having to even violate kindness, I can create a situation that, creates a conversation that provides clarity and ensures that, yes, I'm in charge, I'm the leader, and I chose to use that tool, and you shouldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And if you create the right environment, no one wants to, because they appreciate it.
Agreed. And I've also found it creates safety. It creates a feeling of safety where it encourages people to say things maybe they wouldn't necessarily bring up if they were fearful or intimidated. Yes. All right. So last question. It's a question I ask all of my guests. You work out of your home, I suppose. That's your office that you're in. All right. So you're going to think this is a little bit silly, but I think it's insightful. So God forbid this doesn't happen, but your office catches fire. You're able to run in and grab one thing from your office. What is it that you take?
If my office catches fire and I only have an opportunity to grab one thing, I think I'm going to grab that compass that's on the shelf right across from me. It's a compass that's gone on all my deployments, and it's a piece of not only that azimuth analogy, but I think that it's a piece that reminds me a bit of where I've been, and the sacrifice of others when I've been in that space, and it helps remind me that, not only do I need to employ that kindness, but I just need to be and continue to be in the service of others because of that sacrifice that others have made.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an unbelievably thoughtful response on the off the cuff.
I wish I
on
had
the spot. So
wow. But maybe I overthought it.
Well, it's impressive and it's inspiring, frankly. Yeah. So I really appreciate it.
I loved being a special forces officer. My time in the military, my time at West Point, I as a plebe, I honored the fact that I'm standing on the ground that Thomas Jefferson put together and Eisenhower and MacArthur were on. As a Green Beret, I love the opportunity of the things that we were able to do. And as a coach now, like, the people that I get to work with are so unbelievably extraordinary. The opportunity to help them out and help out their business. I think it's super cool that I get to do that. And I love where it's going.
Yeah. Well, you're obviously very good at it. And my hope is to help, spread that word, get it out there, so that other people can see, I think, how inspiring it is for any business leader. And, I would love to offline. I'd love to follow up and hear more about your consulting. Okay.
Brandon, all thanks.
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, gosh, what incredible. I really appreciate you being here and for your time. I agree. Could not agree more. And I will be in touch ASAP, Chris. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.